Everyone. Do you enjoy traveling? When it comes to traveling abroad, the most common means of transportation is the airplane. However, for those flying in economy class, the cramped seats often leave little room to stretch out and relax, leading to dissatisfaction for many passengers. This is especially true for long-haul flights, where one must endure long hours in a confined space, with little opportunity to change posture, requiring considerable patience. But did you know that the modern practice of cramming passengers into airplanes is actually a relatively recent development? From the 1950s to the 1970s, there was an era of air travel, often referred to as the golden age of flying. A luxurious space rivaling that of high-end hotels, where elegantly dressed gentlemen and ladies savored exquisite gourmet cuisine. The cabins of that era offered a world beyond imagination compared to modern airplanes, embodying a truly luxurious air travel experience worthy of being called the Golden Age. So, what were these airplanes of the Golden Age like? And why was such opulence and grandeur offered during that era? Behind the glittering world of luxury, there was also a shadowy side that reveals another layer of this fascinating period. Let's embark on a journey into the golden age of airlines. Welcome aboard a special flight, where dapper gentlemen and elegant ladies enjoyed an exceptional air travel experience. Today, we can fly at affordable prices thanks to low-cost airlines. However, during the early days of air travel from the 1950s to the 1970s, flying was incredibly expensive and entirely out of reach for the average person. So, how much did flights cost back then? According to a 1955 pamphlet from the American airline TWA, a round-trip ticket from Chicago to Phoenix was priced at $138. When adjusted for modern inflation, that would be equivalent to a staggering $1,200 today. Paying $1,200 for a domestic flight clearly shows that air travel in those days was truly a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Until the airline deregulation that began in the 1970s, flying was an exclusive privilege available only to the affluent. Given such a stark contrast in accessibility, it's no surprise that the demographics of passengers were completely different from what we see today. When we board a flight today, we often bring neck pillows and eye masks, doing our best to relax and make the cramped cabin environment as comfortable as possible. In contrast, passengers of that era dressed in formal attire for their flights. Men wore three-piece suits, while women adorned themselves with dresses and jewelry. Even for the wealthy, air travel in those days was expensive. But the time spent on the plane was not a dreaded ordeal. Instead, it was a part of the long-awaited vacation, and passengers eagerly anticipated their flight days. As a result, they dressed up and fully enjoyed their time in the air. While airplanes in those days required a dress code akin to a high-end hotel, they also had a casual and convenient side. What was this casual aspect of flying on such formal planes? The answer lies in security. Back then, airports resembled bus terminals. There were no metal detectors, no extensive security checks, and no multiple boarding procedures. As a result, arriving at the airport just 20 minutes before the flight was often sufficient, and loved ones could accompany passengers all the way to the gate to see them off. There was no need to go through rigorous checks for prohibited items, or to wait at the airport 2 hours before the flight, as is the case today. While this convenience was certainly appealing, doesn't it sound a bit unsettling? It feels as though security was far too lax. And indeed, such concerns were well-founded. The lack of security was so extreme that hijackings occurred frequently on airplanes during that era. In fact, records show that between 1968 and 1972, a span of just 4 years, there were a staggering 130 hijackings of American airplanes. In the worst cases, multiple incidents even occurred on the same day. It was so easy for passengers to board flights that criminals could just as easily hop on as well. Now, let's return to the atmosphere on board. For passengers of that time, enjoying a luxurious experience in the air was itself a major part of the appeal. However, just imagining getting on a plane in formal attire sounds exhausting, doesn't it? You might wonder how people of that era felt about it. Interestingly, passengers of the golden age of airlines didn't feel cramped or uncomfortable at all. Why? Because the seats back then were incredibly spacious. In the early days of aviation, there wasn't even a distinction between business and economy class, even after first class was introduced later. Economy seats still provided plenty of room to stretch out and relax. So, what was the first-class cabin like? Depending on the airline, first-class passengers enjoyed amenities such as dining tables, bunk beds, and even lounges. It was truly a flying luxury hotel. Moreover, many airlines not only provided free alcohol, but also allowed passengers to smoke freely on board. Smoking on a plane, aside from the health implications, raises questions about safety. Wasn't it dangerous? In fact, it wasn't that airlines of the time ignored the risks of fire. They did impose restrictions. However, these restrictions were rather peculiar. From the 1950s to the 1960s, only airport terminals were designated as non-smoking areas. This was due to the risk of cigarette smoke igniting fuel fumes. So while precautions were taken to prevent fires at terminals, smoking on board was somehow not considered a significant hazard. That said, even with the freedom to drink and smoke, passengers in those days couldn't watch movies as we can today. On long flights, they surely must have struggled to pass the time. To address this, airlines encouraged passengers to do something specific: write postcards. They suggested writing postcards to loved ones, creating a thoughtful and personal gesture, with a little buzz from the complimentary alcohol. Expressing gratitude and emotions that might otherwise be difficult to share probably became easier. More than anything, writing postcards could make for a wonderful keepsake of the journey. As passengers settled in and relaxed during their elegant flight, it would soon be time for the much-anticipated meal service. When you hear "in-flight meal," you might think, how good could it really be? It's a fair assumption. However, the meals served during the so-called golden age of air travel were truly extraordinary. The menu featured main courses such as lobster, roast beef, and prime rib, presented as part of a multi-course meal. This luxurious meal could be enjoyed along with champagne, wine, and more. Moreover, the meals were served on authentic ceramic and glassware, and passengers could choose from multiple courses to suit their preferences. It feels like an incomparable, premium travel experience compared to what we know today. And that's exactly why this era is referred to as the golden age of air travel. However, it wasn't entirely a perfect and praiseworthy experience. This excessive luxury was, in part, designed to distract passengers from the fatal flaws of air travel at the time. So, what other drawbacks did air travel have during this era? First and foremost, the ride quality was absolutely dreadful. Until the 1960s, planes like the Lockheed Constellation and the Douglas DC-7 were commonly used, both of which were propeller-driven aircraft. The main characteristics of these planes? They were incredibly noisy and prone to severe turbulence. Why was the ride so uncomfortable? A large part of it stemmed from technological limitations. For example, modern airplanes are equipped with pressurization systems that maintain cabin pressure at high altitudes. In contrast, planes of that era lacked this technology, forcing them to fly at lower altitudes. This made it difficult to avoid bad weather or take alternate routes, resulting in a rougher ride. As a result, air sickness bags were an absolute necessity on flights during the Golden Age. For those prone to motion sickness, it must have been a nightmare. Imagine being in a cabin full of decorations and furnishings, enduring violent turbulence. Walking through the lounge, with real knives and forks laid out on tables, was practically a life or death situation. Losing your balance and putting your hand down for support could result in being stabbed by a knife. And the most dangerous part of all was first class. First-class cabins were equipped with fragile glass partitions between seats, and even a slight stumble into one could result in a serious injury. Passengers had to navigate through a cabin full of obstacles, constantly at risk of turbulence, all while trying to maintain their balance and informal attire, no less. This was undeniably dangerous. In fact, in 1952, the odds of dying on a flight were more than 4 times higher than they are today. While the golden age of airlines undoubtedly offered a luxurious and glamorous experience, it was also fraught with significant dangers. To divert passengers' attention from these shortcomings, airlines came up with another strategy: hiring beautiful and refined flight attendants. Dressed in miniskirts and pillbox hats, these glamorous women provided top-tier service with a smile, even while dealing with intoxicated passengers. It must have been an incredibly stressful job. At the time, airlines imposed strict regulations on flight attendants. These included requirements for weight, appearance, and behavior. Additionally, they were often required to remain single and exhibit outgoing, friendly personalities. Moreover, during interviews, it was not uncommon for candidates to be asked to lift their skirts to prove they had legs suitable for the uniform. Such a job requirement would undoubtedly be considered completely unacceptable today. Perhaps this contributed to increased passenger satisfaction. Another drawback of air travel at the time was the absence of baggage claim carousels. Airport conveyor systems had not yet been invented, so the standard baggage handling systems we take for granted today did not exist. As a result, after disembarking the plane, passengers had to walk to a designated counter, present their ticket to the staff, and wait at the spot until a porter brought their luggage. Passengers had no choice but to patiently wait for their luggage to arrive. A special journey enjoyed by elegantly dressed gentlemen and ladies in a luxurious and glamorous atmosphere. This was the image of air travel during the Golden Age. If one could overlook the various drawbacks, such as ride quality and safety concerns, then it might truly deserve to be called the Golden Age. The world's history is still shrouded in mysteries. Let's continue to embark on journeys together to uncover those mysteries. Until our next adventure, see you again soon. Thank you for watching.